So, episode 18 of You Understood's podcast. We're in a different location. So we're at the Green Room over in Glasgow. And I am proud and grateful and delighted to welcome our guest, Brian Glass. Brian, I'm not going to introduce you because I cannot do you justice. So please introduce yourself.
What, you think I'm going to do me justice?
I hope so.
Really? I mean, we've had a conversation about that before, Brian Glass, that's my name. And I am what am I really? I'm a trainer. Yes, I am a trainer. That would be me. I train, I can train anything, actually. You just ask me, I'll do it. It's fine, that's no problem. But I get more passionate about the things that I get involved in. Mm-hmm. So I train in mental health first aid and suicide prevention and anything really mental health orientated. I've written a few things as part of my job with Changes, the mental health charity in East Lothian. Let's get their name in there. And also as part of it, I'm a consultant trainer for Edinburgh College, and I've written stuff for them. And I'm also freelance myself, but I just pinch stuff for everything else because that's what trainers do. I don't know, that's what trainers do. We just pinch stuff.
That's fair enough, as long as it's good, right?
Yeah.
How long have you been doing the training stuff?
Right, doing the training stuff it's quite interesting because there are certain courses I've been doing longer than others. Yep. So I started work for Changes in 2008.
Okay.
And in there I was admin. That was me, admin, to organise what was then the Choose Life training suite, which was mental health first aid, ASIST and suicide, and Safe Talk, basically. That's the two suicide courses. And I organised them for four years. And then I started running out of trainers.
To deliver it. Okay, yeah.
Because they moved on, they do somewhere else, or they changed jobs, and then the new bosses are saying, no, you're not getting time off to do that. No, because it was all voluntary at that point.
Right, okay.
So in 2012, I kind of went, I had a year, 2011, where I had no courses running because I had no trainers.
God.
And the suicide rates went up.
See, the need really doesn't change, does it? I want to come back to training in more detail.
I'm going to come back. You asked me how long I've been doing it. So 2012, I learned how to deliver Safe Talk. Yeah. 2015, I learned how to deliver mental health first aid. Okay. And then 2016, I learned how to train applied suicide intervention skills training. That's the ASIST training.
Goodness me.
So yeah, you're really looking at the basic stuff. It's been about 12 years that I've been doing the training. And in various stages, effectively. So that's my experience around that.
What I always like to do is come away from the kind of the professional life, and who's Brian as a person, right?
Ooh,
so tell us as much of the story as you're comfortable sharing. Yeah. Just around kind of what led you up to that point, but not just from a professional perspective, a personal perspective as well.
And all the rest of it. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing. One of the prerequisites for actually being able to deliver mental health first aid is that you've had experience of a mental illness. Doesn't mean to say that you have to have had a mental illness, just if you've had experience of it or worked in the sector, that's the kind of thing that's around that. Well, I have actual very close perspective around mental illness, so that's where I'm coming from on that one. I have depression and anxiety, that's my bag, and it's not... I've got a co-trainer that basically kind of says, yeah, so it's fun, fun is very ironic at that point. Yeah. But it's not fun, it's not great, but I'm actually quite grateful for it. I have learned so much about myself, I've learned so much about other people, and I've got this massive passion now to help other people, and part of it is the training. But the good thing is I deliver training, the old adage that they say, those who can do and those who can't teach, well, actually I do train people to help people but I also put it into practice. And I've done that as well in changes for a number of years, helping people in crisis, helping people with suicide, stuff like that. Largely because of where I was. Now, you're going back to when I was early 30s, basically.
So a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah, a couple of years ago, yeah. Shh, don't tell people. However, at that point, it's quite funny. You kind of look back and say, how the heck did I become this age? Where did this
Where did the time go? Yeah.
Where is it going? What am I doing? Who am I? But early 30s, I'd not long been married. I got married when I was 28, and I was about 3 or 4 years married. And I changed jobs because working in the financial sector and working in a bank, they had this wonderful general idea that if you're going to do things that we don't really approve of, like get married, and sort of that kind of thing.
Can't have a personal life.
No, you can't have a personal life at all. And they say, we'll just move you somewhere. And they sent me to a little place called Fauldhouse, which was like about 40-minute journey, effectively, on the back roads to get to. It's about halfway between Edinburgh and Glasgow. Not quite halfway, but it's
but that was a daily commute.
That's a daily commute,
right, okay.
because I was living in Leith at that time, right, so that was quite a journey.
Yep.
I used to come out from there because it's a former mining village, and they had coal bins all over the place. I used to come out, and there was a nice film of dust all over my car. Anyway, I didn't like it there, and I moved and I changed jobs. Gone into another. Now, at that point, a guy in his mid-30s, he's going into, his early 30s, and he's going into a new job in a new financial institution, which was a big organisation in Edinburgh at the time. Am I allowed to say things in these podcasts? I probably was. I work for Standard Life.
Say what you want.
I work for Standard Life.
It's a fact.
It's there.
Absolutely.
And actually, for me, they were brilliant. They were absolutely fantastic. In the beginning, it's just one of those things that happens. But it was through that. So I kind of threw myself into that job, and I did all sorts of things and just kind of worked and got myself into a complete sort of problem area. But there was one particular time I contracted a virus, a physical virus. And what I know about viruses now, as far as the doctors are concerned, if they tell you you've got a virus, it means they haven't got a clue what's wrong with you and have no idea how to treat you. Yep. So that was it.
Go home, get better, right?
Yeah, basically. It's just going to take time. That's it. And I get that. That's absolutely fine. But I was floored for a whole month. I'd never been that ill in my life. I couldn't do anything. I could hardly walk. I could hardly get myself from the bed to the toilet. That was how bad it was.
Sounds bad, yeah.
And then about 4 months later, I was not feeling great. I had no idea what was wrong, but I was not enjoying anything. There was nothing that was fun anymore. And I had these really low feelings, and I had no idea. I couldn't think straight. It's hard to describe. And yet you go through the list of all the things of depression, and I had them all. You could tick them all off and all the rest of it.
But you didn't know that.
But I didn't know that at the time, and I just went to the doctor and said, I don't feel great. What's going on? And largely, most of the time, I feel scared. And he went, you mean you're anxious? And I said, no, I'm scared. Same thing. We have lots of posh words for anxiety. It's just bizarre, But anyway, so he kind of he picked it quite quickly and basically said I was depressed. And I was like, what? And here's the thing, he said, you're clinically depressed, Brian. And I went, is that any different from normal depression? And he went, no, it just means you've been diagnosed, Right. It's a diagnosis you've had, So, we put labels on lots of things. It's weird, but... I was depressed. I had all these things. I was like, well, how does that affect me? I said, well, it's not good. But I tell you what, I'll give you a wee tip. It says, go and get this book. It's called The Feeling Good Handbook by a guy called Burns. And I've noticed it's just behind you there. Or the more modern version is just behind you there. It's actually a smaller version because actually it's quite thick. It's about that thick. It is like depression now that I know about it and I know everything that goes on with it and stuff like that. Your thinking goes away, your concentration goes away, your energy and your motivation all disappears, and they give you a big book like that that's thick with very small writing
and
in
expect you to get
and
through.
Expect you to go through it, and it's just like I still haven't read it. And I'm not saying that proudly. It's just I still haven't read it. I've not had the motivation required at that time when you're really, really ill is huge.
But it's hard to explain that to someone who hasn't been kind of devoid of those human traits, right?
My kind of thing around what happens to someone who's depressed is I say that depression is very much the flu of mental illness.
Right.
Because the physical symptoms and some of the mental symptoms that you get with depression are identical to what you get when you're flu. So if you're talking lack of energy, that's the lack of energy. I know people do phone in sick. I always laugh when people phone in sick. I've got the flu. It's like, you wouldn't be on the phone if you got the flu because you wouldn't have the energy to actually pick up the phone. Yeah. That's what happens. But people used to ask me, so you're depressed, why can't you get up? Mm-hmm. Just get up in the morning. It's not difficult.
It's simple, isn't it?
It's very simple. You just swing your legs out and then off you go. And that's it. And I'm like, it just makes no odds. But it wasn't until I had a co-trainer, Ilian Stefanov from, at that time, Queen Margaret University, and he used to say basically, well, it's kind of like this. It's, you go into a room, you flick a light switch, and the light comes on. It's brilliant. Everything's working. It's tremendous. When you go into a room one day and you flick a light switch and nothing happens, and you go, what's wrong? Well, it's either the light's not working properly, or there's a break between the lights and the switch.
Or there's a power cut.
Or there's a power cut. It's gone. It's but whatever. It doesn't matter how often you flick that switch. The light ain't coming on. It's like that when you have depression and you're trying to get up. The message is in there, but it's not getting to where it's needed.
And so, again, for someone who I don't believe has gone through that. I mean, I've had some dark days, but I don't believe I've gone into a depression. But I've certainly been anxious. Yeah. So you get anxiety, you get depression. And, is there a link between those two? Or could you say that they're very different things that someone would experience? Or, what's your view on that?
This is the interesting thing around all the mental illnesses. Doesn't matter. And then when we say all the mental illnesses, we're really looking at anxiety, depression, and psychosis. And in psychosis, you've got bipolar and schizophrenia. In the very early stages, all the symptoms are the same.
So it's really hard to
it's really hard to get. I never kind of hammer psychologists and psychiatrists when they get misdiagnosis for schizophrenia or bipolar.
Right.
Because it is immensely difficult to figure out which one is which and where and why and what. However, the good news is if we can get in early enough, and this is why mental health first aid is really, really good. Yeah. If you can spot the signs very early when somebody's not doing well and not good, you can actually make changes, or you can help them make changes with their lives that will improve their mental health and actually prevent the really serious stuff from happening.
And I really want to end this podcast when we get there on all good advice through lived experience. You've got a ton of it, I know, and you've shared it very willingly with a lot of different people. But
let me go back.
Exactly, on your journey.
Let me go back to I'm depressed.
Yes.
I tried to do things that were going to make me okay and all the rest of it. My big fear around that point was I was anxious. I started a new job. I was only in there for about 3 years, and here was me. I'd had a month off for a virus. I was now depressed, and I'd be signed off again. And it was like, the guy was basically saying I'll be off for about 6 months, and I'm like, no, can I be? So I just threw myself back into work and tried to do stuff and went back to work and did all that kind of thing. And I realised that I wasn't coping and I wasn't doing well and it wasn't helping. And I'm on medication and they sent me to counselling. Now, for me, counselling didn't work.
Right, okay.
And it's not because I didn't have a relationship with a counsellor, or that you get that trusting relationship you get this. It's not a romantic one, but it's one of those.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, it was there. It wasn't the kind of stuff, because they sent me to 3 different counsellors. And unfortunately, at the end of it, I had an absolute pathological hatred for the phrase. And how did that make you feel? Just tell me what I need to do to make myself better.
But this is the point, Brian, and I don't want to take us off topic again, but the point is you're seeking, during this journey, you're seeking kind of exits from this, right?
Yeah, totally.
You're actively looking for it. It's not as if you're rolling over and just saying, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, This is it. I take your motivation, your energy goes. It was taking all my energy just to actually get me to work and to get through the day and then to come home. And I ended up putting on a massive amount of weight because I was taking all the stuff that you could eat to give me energy and things like that. Because that's what happens. Your appetite can actually, it does one or two things. It either goes up massively, but it's not the nice stuff you're eating. It's not the good stuff. You're not craving fruit and veg and all the rest of it. It's the snacks, it's the crisps, it's anything to give you that instant energy hit. And what I didn't realise at that point was there's a crash at the end of it once it runs out, and that crash is actually much, much worse when you're depressed than you are normally.
Okay, yep.
So life just seemed to be, life was devoid of anything. It was black. It was absolutely terrible. So I decided at that point, well, I need to do something. Okay, going on holiday is a really good time. That's the thing. We need to go on holiday.
Yep.
So we trundled off down to Bristol. I'd always wanted to go to Bristol. Bristol's got a zoo. It's got a very famous zoo. Mm-hmm. So I thought that'll be a good place to go.
That'll be a good lift.
We hear good stuff.
Yep.
That was when it all started to go massively, massively wrong. Because when I got to Bristol, I went through first night was fine. Got in. It was quite late at night. Got in, went to bed. Brilliant. Me and my wife, superb, fantastic, sleeping, marvellous. Get up the next day, go down to have breakfast. And she's there, and the restaurant was absolutely packed, heaving with people.
Yep.
And my poor little amygdala at the back of my head went, it was there's that meerkat moment sort of thing, but yeah. And I had no idea what hit me. I went into a massive, big panic attack. Fortunately, my wife, she's really clever. She basically got me out of that situation and back up to the room. So at that point...
Was that the first time you'd had a panic attack?
That was the first time I'd ever had a panic attack. I couldn't even have told you that's what I was going through. That was the whole thing.
You had no idea. You had no reference, right?
Idea, no reference point. Yeah. Nothing there at all whatsoever. Yep. It was just this wave of fear. God. It was just in there, and I had no idea. And the hotel room that we were in was 8 floors up, and it had a balcony.
Yeah.
And I'm lying there on the bed, just got this wave after wave of fear and terror and all the rest of it. And I looked at the balcony, and this thought popped into my head. It's like, it's going to stop if you throw yourself off. And it was like, I just said to my wife at that point, you're going to have to hold me. She said, why? I said, because that balcony is looking too inviting right now. So she did. And then 3 or 4 hours later, we ended up in A&E, basically. And that was the first time I'd ever had a suicidal thought. And me being me, I mean, we got back. The basic thing was the doctor said, what's going to make it safe for you? What's going to do this? And it was just go back home. So we went back home. And that was a 6-hour journey from hell, but I was okay with that because they gave me about 7 milligrams of Valium at that point, or
So you're in a bad way, right?
I was in a bad way, yeah. I spent most of it lying down in the back seat of the car, and there's no seatbelt on or anything like that. But hey, I didn't really care at that point because it was great. Yeah. And once I got back and we got all that kind of sort of sorted out, it was really difficult because I knew I wasn't well, and things that they were giving me wasn't going to help. And eventually I got to a reasonably good place by doing some good stuff when the good stuff, that means looking after yourself and taking care and making sure you don't put too much pressure on yourself and doing the nice stuff and the lovely things that you like doing. And I felt better. And it's one of those things that I know there's in mental health first aid, course, they talked to a guy called Gary McDonald, and he goes, yeah, I felt better. And it was great. And I went to the doctor and said, I can go back to work now. He said, no, you're not going to message yet, you know. And that was kind of like me. Although nobody told me that it wasn't a good idea not to go back to work at that point. I went back to work and I threw myself back into work again. And the doctor was looking at me. I was doing well. I thought it was great. It was brilliant. So they tried to take me off the medication.
Big problem.
Yeah, I had another breakdown. And then I got better again because they put me back on the medication. And then a little bit later, they tried to take me off again. This has taken over place over about 3 to 5 years.
I was going to ask about
that. That's about
and you were trying to kind of get...
And I was trying to get myself
back into the routine.
I was back in the routine, doing the things that I used to do and all the rest of it, because that's what, that's what defined me.
Yes,
Yeah, I didn't know at that time that I'm a human being, not a human doing.
Exactly.
It was just, that was my journey. So I had a third breakdown. There was a lot of other things around that. I had a manager in Standard Life that bullied me, absolutely horrendous, didn't like me at all, and did all sorts of stuff to me. And I had a breakdown. I had my first dissociative episode. That means where you're there, but you're not there. It was like, the only way I can describe this, and I know other people have done the same sort of kind of thing, is that you're looking at yourself down this very big, huge tunnel, and you're walking around as if you're doing everything normally.
But you're looking at yourself.
But I'm looking at myself down this long tunnel, and I've got no control over what's happening.
That's strange.
It's called a dissociative state, and it's like, and people just assumed I was doing it because I was sitting at my desk and I was doing work and all the rest of it, but I wasn't communicating with anyone.
Right, okay.
And it wasn't until somebody came to me and sort of like, Brian, and I was not responding, and they just went, because I'm way back in this massive big tunnel at the other end, and I'm like screaming that I'm not well. And so I was off for another period of time, and they put me back on medication again. It now transpires that I'm unfortunately one of those people who, I always put it that I can't, and my brain doesn't produce enough serotonin for me. It's not that the lack of serotonin causes the depression. It's that lack of serotonin is part of the depression.
Got it. Yep.
It does not cause.
Yes.
But it is about. So what my GP basically says, no, Brian, it's not a case of you can't produce enough, you use it up too quickly. And that is just so me, because I do everything. I generally have a tendency to do things like 110 miles an hour, especially if it's like food and stuff. I'll be finished dinner before you've even finished your starter. That's how it works. So I need the top off of that of medication. I'll be on that for the rest of my life. It's just, take it off me, and I will very quickly be back in a dark place.
Because you've been there, done that, right?
Been there, done it 3 times.
Yep.
So, hey, that's the way it's going to be.
And this is the point. We each know ourselves better than anyone else can know us, right?
I always maintain that. Who is the expert on Brian?
Absolutely.
Well, it's Brian.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sometimes if I could just get some clinicians to just sort of realise that, hey, who is the expert on Brian? Yeah. Well, it is Brian. Let's ask Brian then.
It's funny that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. I know what's wrong with you. I'm going to fix you. That was the very first psychiatrist I saw.
So at the end of that kind of, and I say the end because obviously it's an ongoing thing.
It's an ongoing thing,
But at the end of that particular 3 to 5 year journey, which sounds horrific, by the way.
It was.
Really, really quite challenging. And I guess
for my wife.
Well, absolutely. But we're lucky, that you're still here, right? And you're able to tell this story. So the things that are going through my mind are you've experienced it. You understand what it looks like. We'll get on to the things that can work for the majority of people, and they won't always work for everyone. But the more mechanisms you have, the better equipped you are.
Oh yes.
I think recognizing it is a really important point, and I guess this is ultimately what makes you such a good, powerful, well-respected, impactful trainer, because you're not teaching from the books.
No.
Right? You're teaching, yes, from the books, but from real life. Yeah. So the things running through my brain, I guess, is joining the world that you're in today and the journey that got you to that point is you're now kind of surrounded, really, because your customers, if you like, they're all going through similar type challenges. So you're surrounded by individuals and people who are challenged to some degree. Does that make it more challenging for you as Brian, or does it actually help you focus on them versus, you know, having time to look at yourself, if that makes sense?
It's always the kind of case. I put down that I have more knowledge now about myself and how I think and where I go and areas to avoid and times when I'm going to really beat myself up quite a lot, because we all beat ourselves up. That's the weird thing about us humans. You know, I always kind of say to people, well, I'll say to you, who's Paul's worst critic?
Yeah, me, absolutely.
It's Paul. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Nobody else comes a patch near that. No. It's the same with Brian. Brian's his own worst critic, so I'd never cut myself any slack. And there are times when, if I'm not feeling great, and if I get one piece of bad feedback out of my average number of people on a training course is, well, the maximum we can get is 24. So out of that, I get 23. Absolutely fantastic. Brian was brilliant. It was tremendous and brilliant. Somebody didn't like Brian. It was, didn't like that. It was crap. It was rubbish. It was, and that's me. That's what I focus on.
Isn't it?
How bad is that?
That's a human trait.
Yeah, it's a very human trait. But when you have depression and then anxiety, you add that to it, and pretty soon you can be in a very, very dark place very, very quickly.
Goodness me.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
However, being in that particular place and that particular, and I know the signs, I know the symptoms, I know what's going on, and I know very much in the early stages what I need to do to lift my mood. And that's where we come to the kind of good stuff that people do, and we'll cover that, I know. But at that point, I know what to do to lift myself out of that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But there does come a point when I go beyond that.
Like a tipping point type.
There's a tipping point where actually I'm so badly off that I stop seeing the signs. I stop looking after myself. I stop doing the right things because I have no other energy to do that. And that's the dangerous points. That's where other people need to step in to help me. And that's absolutely, I've got a wife that knows me very, very well, and she does do that. I've got colleagues that I work with, absolutely, who know and can support and can help. And I have my own support network, and my own support network includes people, friends, family, mainly actually very good friends, as opposed to family, because I've not got a big family. That's fine, and that's okay. So it is a case of having that support network is much, much better than having nothing.
Yes.
Which is kind of what I had right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So it makes me a bit better than that. But when it comes to teaching the stuff and actually helping people who aren't well, the authority that comes from me, far as they're concerned, is one of, you've been there, you've done it, you've got the T-shirt. They're more likely to listen to me than they are to listen to somebody who 100%. Says, you should do this. Now, the person could say exactly the same things, but that's what I learned around group counselling or group therapy, effectively with cognitive behavioural therapy, was I got more from the people who were on that than I got from the psychologists that were in the room.
Interesting.
Because they've been there, they've done that, and the support that you get from that. That's why Changes Men's Group is absolutely top notch, and any men's group actually is fantastic. Because if you get a group of men together and they're looking to help each other and support each other through things, it is so powerful. Because the testosterone gets left at the door and nobody's competing with anyone. And it's all about, we'll support this, we'll support you through this, we'll help you through this. Everybody helps each other. It's massively powerful.
So
it's just getting the men together is the problem.
Is the challenge. So you talked about you didn't have a network of support before you went through that yourself, and then now you've got a strong and it sounds like quite a diverse network of support. So part of that journey is raising awareness within your own ecosystem, right? So that everyone knows and is ready and able to help you.
Totally.
So that brings me on kind of generically to the world and mental health, right? And I'm sure we could do a separate podcast on this, right?
We could.
So
I mean, you know me.
Exactly, right?
I could talk for hours.
Trajectory.
Yeah.
So let me talk about the what I see and I perceive, and that doesn't mean it's right, but what I perceive as the good things going on, right? We're talking about it a lot more. We seem able to share and maybe shake off some of the stigma that was previously associated. When we get onto the stats later, which I'm really keen to share with the audience, but when we talk about the stats, some of that's still there, unfortunately. But I feel like the trajectory, when you look at the numbers, they're increasing, right? So you could say, oh my goodness, the problem's getting worse, and it could be getting worse, but you could also look at it and say, well, it's probably because more people are actually talking about it. So in your opinion, and you're really close to the front line here.
It's my opinion, I have to say that. It's kind of strong, but I used to get a lot when I first started, you're working with a mental health charity. Is it really, and that's good stuff. And then it gradually was getting, is it getting worse? Is it getting worse? Are we doing this? Are we creating a bunch of people that are a bunch of snowflakes and all the rest of it? That's the big thing that came out the last few years. But it's kind of like, well, actually, no. I think personally, what's happening with the levels of mental illness prior to COVID was they're all coming up to the level that they'd actually been all the time.
Got it.
But people have now got to the stage where, you know what, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm not going to suck it up and see. I'm not just going to just get on with it and stuff like that. This is not living great. And that's why I love the charity that's got the wonderful name of CAM, the Campaign Against Living Miserably, because that's kind of where most people were 20, 30 years ago. Not all people, obviously.
Kind of stiff up a lip, get on with it.
Get on with it. Just it doesn't matter that your life's falling apart and your head's not anywhere near where it should be, and you hate absolutely everything, and it's one of those things. If I go back now and tell my younger self that, whatever you do, get a job you love doing. Yeah. Because we were all told, just get a job, that's it. And if you hate it, that's okay, that's whatever. Everybody hates their jobs. No, if you love your job and if you have a passion for your job, I'm living my best life right now. And that's because I'm not well. Or because I wasn't well. I wouldn't have got that if it hadn't happened. I could have been still stuck in the Royal Bank. But anyway, it's weird, but it's back at a position. It is now at a position where we're actually talking about it more. The stigma has been reduced, and that's largely due to the huge campaigns that we had. The Choose Life campaign was the biggest one, and it was basically set up to reduce the suicide rate. And it did that. It set itself a very ambitious target of 20%. And by the time it finished in 2012, 2014, it had achieved 18% reduction in suicides. And people are going, oh, we didn't make the target. Doesn't matter, 18%. Absolutely. Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Now, the thing with suicides is they go up and down and all the rest of it, because actually, here's a little clue. Suicide is not about mental health. It's not about mental illness. And that's the other thing. Mental health is not a byword for mental illness. And actually, I was watching Ambulance last night from Wednesday night, and you had the paramedics on there saying, mental health is really, really terrible. And it's, you really want to, hello, we've all got mental health. Absolutely. It's either good, bad, or indifferent. Correct. Mixed odds. But mental illness is what we need to talk about, as well as suicide. Because here's the thing. As far as suicides, when they get reported on the news and all the rest, if they get reported, usually always tagged onto the back of that was the person was mentally ill.
And you're saying there's no connection?
No, I'm not saying there's no connection, but what I am saying is that here's the statistics for you. 3/4 of the people who die by suicide are not known to mental health services.
3/4?
3/4. 75% of those who die by suicide.
So the immediate question is, were they having challenges but nobody was aware of them, i.e. they weren't on the
Quite
radar?
possibly, yeah.
Or is there something else going on? Or
Well,
we don't
actually,
know?
so this is the thing, and this is great doing this podcast in Glasgow because we have an Institute of Suicidal Research that's based in Glasgow University.
Okay.
And they tell us that suicide is mostly driven by a feeling of being trapped, overwhelmed, or response to ongoing pain.
Okay.
Mental illness in there?
No. So what? One of those, multitude of those, or just?
Generally, you probably find it's all three because that's what life does to us. Well, I've found out life is really a nasty person. Life.
It's hard. It's hard.
It's massively hard.
Yeah.
Life throws stuff at you and says cope, and you cope. So throws more stuff at you.
We talked about.
But here's the thing.
Go on.
Right. See, if you don't cope.
Yeah.
Still throws more stuff at you.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't care.
It doesn't. No, not at all.
It doesn't care. And we talked about people being in control of their life.
Yeah.
And that's lunacy, really, isn't it?
No, we're not really.
We're not at all in control of life.
We did that in Costa before we came here. And I just felt, well, if you are actually in control of your life, Paul, go and hold your breath for the next 3 minutes.
Yep.
That possible? No. You can't stop breathing. Mm-hmm. That's why we drown. Mm-hmm. Not because we ingest the water, it's because we can't stop breathing.
Exactly, yeah.
If we could stop breathing, we'd be okay.
Yep.
But we can't. We're not actually in that much control of our life. I'm sorry to do that to people, but actually, control is a big thing.
Yeah.
That is a big thing. For us, our brain is concerned. It wants control of everything. And that's the issue. Because we're largely not in control. It's how we deal with that.
It's accepting
the kind of thing. It's accepting you're not in control and allowing things to happen to you, but being in control of what you can control. And that's how Viktor Frankl survived his incarceration in Auschwitz, basically, in the concentration camps. Controlling what he could. Yep. So when they brought him in to interview him to torture him, basically, and they told him to sit there, he always moved the chair and then he sat down. Because that was the bit he was in control of. That's the only bit he could control. So control is important.
Yeah.
But when life gets out of control, and you're not well, that's why actually people with a mental illness, there is a link between mental illness and suicide. Right. And it's not the one that people think about. It is actually, if you have a mental illness, your risk of suicide goes massively higher than if you haven't got one. And that's the big thing. So, for instance, and I'll use depression because that's the one. A, I know the statistics for that, and B, it's more personal to me. But 15% of people who are depressed will kill themselves. That's the statistics. And that's huge. Especially when you consider the numbers, of how many people get it. 1 in 4 people will have a mental health issue. Now, it used to be, it was 1 in 4 in their lifetime.
Yes.
The ones that I picked out from just a few months ago, well, actually, the stuff that was a few months ago, basically, they will have 1 in 4 will have a mental health issue in any given year.
Goodness.
So of that 1 in 4, 15% of them, if you multiply all that up, 15% of them, if they've got depression, will die by suicide.
So repeat those 3 things again that are key indicators, because it's worth doing that. So for suicide.
Suicide.
The kind of indicators.
Yeah. Feeling of being trapped, feeling of being overwhelmed, and a response to ongoing pain. Doesn't matter whether that pain is psychological, physical, or mental. No, that's mental. Emotional, that's the third one.
And where you get a combination
and usually
of those,
you'll get all 3.
And the risk then significantly goes up.
Significantly higher.
So
doesn't mean to say that everybody will.
No, but the risk.
But the risk is
absolutely
higher. And that's that risk factor that's the problem.
And the great thing is, let's talk about suicide, right? Yeah. Let's not hide it. Let's talk about
totally.
it. So
you have to, because it's one of these things. We don't talk about mental health.
Yep.
We don't talk about suicide.
Yep.
When we don't do that, these subjects
gives it power, right?
Power, massive power.
Yeah.
And we need to rob these subjects of that power, because we don't talk. If we don't talk about them, and everybody becomes afraid of them.
Yep.
Now, if we go back to, I'll go back to Sir Thomas More and what he said way back in the sort of like 15th, 14th centuries. I don't know when it was about. It was about way back in history. And he talked about the thing that had massive power over people in those times, and that was the devil.
Okay.
And, going on the religious vent on that one. And he actually wrote in one of his books, basically, he said, the devil, that proud spirit, laugh at him and he'll run away. That's a translation. That's not exactly what he wrote, but it's a translation of what was there. And it's right. Mental illness and depression have massive power. Now, I never laugh at people who are going through the stuff, but I'll laugh at the subjects themselves. And that's not any different from any comedian, actually.
No, it's important.
It's massively important. Because if you can laugh at it, you take away its massive power.
You've often talked about a kind of a voice, as someone on the shoulder, right?
I always turn suicide into a little creature that sits on your shoulder, and there's a big, massive posh word for that called anthropomorphism. I can never quite get it right.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's quite good. I actually got it right. Yeah, wow. But yeah, turning it into a little creature that sits on your shoulder. And this is the problem with suicide: is it whispers in the person's ear constantly, but it's always lies. That's weird. I always been saying that's the biggest liar on the planet.
And it's patient.
And it's always very patient, because it never starts with, you should go kill yourself. Ever.
But it builds you up to that, right?
Oh, totally. It starts off with usually the kind of things, how bad a person are you? What crap is that? Life is crap. Look at that. You're not coping with this. Everybody else is coping with it. What's going on? How bad are you? But it's all low-level stuff, and, it's one of those things,
away, right?
If you're not watching what you're thinking, it goes in there, and it sits. Yeah. And it's sort of like, it's like a little seed that then germinates and sort of grows and becomes, and eventually what it does is it builds tunnel, it builds tunnel vision that says, that's the only way out. And it blocks off everything else that you've got in your life. But it's all based on lies, and, a couple of the biggest lies things is basically nobody cares.
Right.
That's one of them. Nobody cares. Now I always go and sort of like, and I say, well, that's very simple. Samaritans. Remember Samaritans? If anybody's really struggling out there, 116, 123, they're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the UK. That's what they're there for. Now, who answers the phone in Samaritans? It's volunteers.
The volunteers, absolutely, yeah.
They don't get paid for it.
No.
You don't do that kind of job if you don't care.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't care. I'll just go and volunteer for Samaritan. What? No, that's not what they do.
Yep.
They care. There's always someone who cares.
And we'll give, at the end of the podcast, in the links, we'll give all the information around contacts, telephone numbers.
Absolutely.
Emails,
Samaritans is not
else.
the only.
No.
What's the very famous thing you need to say in things now?
I know what you mean.
Other helplines are available.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There are, and then we get stuck on the statistics and stuff and things like that.
So give us a few statistics just to bring it to life, and then we'll
suicide and unfortunately. Being it's almost like being a devolved area. It's not really a devolved area, but that's the way it's gone.
Yep.
We have stats for Scotland, we have stats for Northern Ireland, we have stats for England, we have stats for Wales.
Yep.
Because I live in Scotland, that's the ones that really bother me. So that's what's going out, and that's what will go out and all the rest of it. 762 people in 2022 killed themselves.
762.
Slightly more than 2 people a day. Now, statistically speaking, what they tell me is that for every completed suicide, right, there will be between 40 and 100 people trying to kill themselves.
That's staggering numbers.
So, best case scenario, if you look at it at 2 people a day, you've got 80 people per trying to kill themselves. And in the worst case is 200 people trying to kill themselves. And that's it. 762 is horrendous. Now, the way they compare the stats with all the various nations and right around the whole world and all the rest of it and stuff like that is that they bundle them all into 100,000 per 100,000 people. Okay, so they'll work it all to that. And for Scotland, it's 14.4 people per 100,000. That's in 2022. In 2021, it was 13.9. So it's gone up a little bit. For men, though, it's massive. It's huge.
Big jump.
Big jump. 21.8 per 100,000. So almost 22 people per 100,000 will kill themselves if you're a man. For a woman, it's 7.4.
So early intervention. Prevention is absolutely critical,
It's
right?
crucial. It's absolutely crucial. But it's one of those things when somebody is feeling suicidal and when people are actually mentally unwell in a whole, the signs are roughly the same. There's what I would call red flags.
Yeah.
Withdrawal from everything that they normally do. Now, if you've got somebody who is a complete loner and doesn't do very much anyway, they'll suddenly become the life and soul of the party. So what I'm trying to say is effectively...
So it's deviation
away from the norm for that person. So that's the kind of thing. This is where, when we do the training, we're really looking at people looking out for their colleagues, their people that they work with closely, as in clients and stuff, things like that, families and friends. If you can watch out, if you can see some of these signs, the best way to deal with it is, well, when you want to know something, what do? You ask questions.
Absolutely.
And that's all. And it's almost like a willingness to be nosy. So if you can get in early enough and ask, but you put it into context. You don't just come and wandering up to somebody and say, Paul, are you thinking about killing yourself today? And Paul says... I've asked you that question. You think you're killing yourself?
Yeah. And I'm not.
No, that's right. I can't go anywhere with that. However, if I go up to Paul and say, right, sometimes when people are missing their work, their performance is dipping, and they've withdrawn from all the kind of leisure things that you're usually doing, they might think about suicide. Have you had any of those thoughts? You're more likely to get a yes as an answer than not, because you've picked up on the signs that have been issued. And that's it. It's the one thing I'll tell, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually suicidal. It might just mean that they're not well mentally.
Right.
Now, I've just kind of realised I'm trying to sort of like kind of saying to myself, it's not related to mental illness, but when you're not thinking straight, when you're not doing it, doesn't mean you're not mentally wet. You're not mentally ill. You haven't got an illness. You're just not kind of well. If you're not on your game. You're not. You're kind of lowered your mood and stuff like that, as opposed to having an illness. And if you can get in, like I say, early enough, you can stop that from developing, because here's what I know about suicidal thoughts in themselves, is you can't stop them. Because, hey, you can't stop any thought, can you? When you think about it. So whatever you do in the next 30 seconds, and this could be people watching the podcast, whatever you do in the next 30 seconds, do not think of an elephant. Right, how many elephants in the room?
Of course.
Yeah? How many elephants on the podcast, That's it. You can't stop a thought, but what you can stop is action coming from a thought.
And that's a really profound statement. It really is. Because if you think about it, it's very, very powerful.
Oh, totally. Totally. And when you're not under pressure, when you're not at the end of your tether, when you are coping with life and think life's great and doing all well, somebody, the thought pops in, you know what, you should go and kill yourself, you kind of go, you really? As I can sometimes say, you can just tell it to Foxtrot Oscar, that's the easy thing. And that's okay. But when you're at a low ebb, when you're not feeling great mentally, that doesn't necessarily mean you have a mental illness. If you're not feeling great mentally, it becomes harder to tell that little creature to get lost. And it's difficult. And that's how it works. And that's how insidious it is, because it never attacks you when you're doing well.
Is part of the solution kind of, and only part of it, but is it really understanding what gives you joy or what gives you pleasure or contentment in your life? Because your life will be different to everyone else's life. But it's identifying that for you, isn't it?
Yeah. Our brains are massively complex. I know that. And I'm not a brain surgeon or a psychologist or anything like that.
Yet. Never too late, Brian. Never too late.
they are massively complex, but here's what I've learned about them. They're incredibly lazy as well, which makes sense because you don't want to actually use all your brain power to create new pathways in your neural network for something you've done already.
Yep.
And we know this is the way we go. This is what happened. Oh, I've got a pathway for that.
Straight
there.
Yep.
Straight. Do not pass go.
Yep.
Do not collect £200. Don't even think about it.
Yep.
Problem is, it does that for the good things. It also does it for the bad things. So the last time you got a bad review, Brian, this is what we did. Oh, we'll go down that pathway then. No, that wasn't very helpful, you know. I ended up beating myself up. I ended up at one point getting suicidal because I'd said something wrong and it hadn't gone down like a lead balloon. And then I got a complaint arrived and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm a terrible person. I'm absolutely awful. And the thought popped into my head, I don't want to be here. That's a suicidal thought. Knowing what I knew at that point and what had happened previously, from what happened previously and all the rest of it, that was the third time. I'd done the second time as well. That's a suicidal thought. I know what to do with those. I need to go and talk to someone. And that's the big thing. Because if you leave any thought in your head, what happens to it?
It festers and grows.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's never usually nice, especially when it's festering. It's not. So how do I get back down to normal size that I can deal with it and all the rest of it? Is I take it out of my brain and I bring it into what I call the real. You talk to someone, and that's the crucial thing. So at that point, I was talking to a friend, and then I took myself along to the GP because I didn't want to be here. And actually, I was in the house alone. And okay, I talked to a friend, but they just kept me talking till, it's what happens. And I took myself to the GP and just basically told them I just want to die right now. And that was it. They looked after me. That was a really good experience I had. I know some people out there don't have good experiences when that happens, but it was a really good experience, a positive experience.
But it's about keeping the person safe,
It's about keeping the person safe. It's about stopping you from acting on those thoughts. And it's one of those things that suicide's permanent. The problem is only temporary. Do you really want to make a permanent decision on a temporary problem? Because actually, and it's the thing, it's the other thing, is this is where I can fall out with an awful lot of people on the internet nowadays. Never base major decisions on your feelings. Because your feelings change.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely.
Constantly. And that's the thing about suicide. You got a bad feeling, you're feeling you don't want to be here, you're feeling it will change. You just need to wait.
Yes.
So pause, stop, think about it. Pause. Another feeling will come along in a minute. Might be bad, might be worse, might be better. It might not. Just keep pausing till the good stuff comes along. And it does eventually, because you run out of the bad stuff. But you need other people sometimes to remind you what the good stuff is. And that was what the friend on the phone reminded me of, was just how good a person I am, just how supportive and generous and helpful I am to other people. How about you be supportive and generous to yourself, Brian?
Self-care, self-love.
It's that kind of thing. And, there's sometimes I do actually kind of blame a guy called John Calvin. The guy from history starts the Protestant movement and all that, kind of helps with that and all the rest of it. Because he basically kind of stuff was like, yourself doesn't matter. It's all about other people, or it's about God. And it's like, okay. And he based it largely on love your neighbour and stopped there.
Right.
But if you actually look at the whole quote, it's love your neighbour as you love yourself. So you can't actually love your neighbour if you don't love yourself. It doesn't mean to say that you love yourself to the excess.
No, of
which
course.
Is then selfish, and I get that. But there is a bit there that you have to look after yourself. Now, it can be just the basics. If you don't eat, you're going to die. That's self-care.
Yeah, and looking after yourself enables you to give the best version of yourself to other people, right?
And that's it. Now, the internet's great and it's brilliant at times. Sometimes it's not. I know that, and it's fine. But actually, some of the good stuff that comes out, there was one that came out in the beginning of this year, actually. It was all over the place. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yep. Perfect.
That's right.
Perfect analogy.
Now, if that analogy of your internal resources is that cup, and you've drained that cup.
Because it's finite. Yep.
Yeah. Because you lose your energy.
Absolutely.
You do it. You take care of other people. You do all that sort of stuff. You do that. This is the problem that the NHS has at the moment, because all their caring people have cared for people without being able to refill their cup.
Absolutely. Yep.
And you know what? Money's not the answer. It's time. It's doing the stuff that you love doing. That's how you refill that cup inside yourself. Doing the stuff that, here's where we make our brains work for us. Doing the stuff that almost automatically lifts our mood. Now, that's where our brain has, and they call these things, these pathways, I call it, they call them learned responses. Now, the biggest learned response we have is something that we learned when we were kids, like babies. And it's a smile. The brain has associated smiling with us being happy or other people being happy. And that's what we do. Now, here's the thing. Smiling is just muscle movement. Oh, but you only smile when you're happy. Yeah, that's what your brain puts to it. That's what it's done. That's the pathway it goes down. So next time you're feeling not so great and you're having a bad day and all the rest of it, walk around with a fixed grin on your face.
Isn't there a release of serotonin when you smile as well?
Absolutely. Because this is what it does. The brain says, oh, we're happy. I'll give you the good chemicals.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yep.
And it'll do it automatically, whether you're actually feeling happy or not. So you walk around with a fixed grin, it does two things. One, it gives you the happy chemicals, and in half an hour, you'll start to feel better.
So this is the point.
The second thing, just coming back, the second thing that goes with that is it drives everybody else crazy. And I love doing that.
So to wrap it up, let's finish on good advice, guidance. As I said, we'll put the links and the contact numbers in, but as a go-to for anyone that might be struggling, it doesn't matter where they are on that line, but as a go-to, just some shout-outs to
some shout-outs to do. I would say the first thing is to tell somebody you're not feeling great.
So communicate
to people. Talk to them. You know, and talk to trusted people. Don't talk to the ones that are going to go and really,
or strangers on the internet,
or strangers on the internet, and they're just going to say, "Well, you're feeling suicidal, go kill yourself." You know, that's not a good answer. It really isn't.
Okay.
It's talk to people who can help. Talk to people who are going to add to your safety. So it's people you trust. It's people that you know will have your back, basically.
Your interest,
people
right?
You get yourself good people. Here's one of the things that a friend of mine basically said. He'd been on a training course with people, and somebody had said basically there are two types of people in the world: radiators, drains. Everybody wants to be with radiators. They don't want to be with drains.
No.
And that's the kind of thing. If you find you've got people who are drains, here's what I would suggest. Try changing your network. You want people that's going to add value. You want to, I want to be a radiator.
Yes.
I want to build people up. I want to have people doing good things. I wanted them to do. Now, one of the things you have to do is to look after yourself. I had to learn that quite a lot, but I've now, I mean, this is one of the bits we haven't covered on all this. I'm an artist. In my part-time sort of kind of stuff. I paint and do that kind of thing. That makes me actually, as a right brain control person, more susceptible to mental illness than any others, than the left brain controlled, which are more logical and that kind of thing. That's that's what happens. But here's the good thing, right? Here's the good thing that comes out of that. As an artist, I can go into my studio, which is a big shed in the garden, but anyway, so I go into my studio and I start painting, and 2 hours later I come out, I'm on the ceiling because that's how good it makes me feel. That's the learned response that my brain's got. It knows that when I'm painting it, I'm happy. So it gives me the happy chemicals. It will automatically. Now, everybody's got something that they do that will automatically make them feel better And as long as it's stuff that doesn't actually come with long-term consequences,
Yes.
And so some people might think, I have a couple of glasses of wine and I feel absolutely brilliant. Yeah. If you do that as your go-to, it has massive consequences to it. But I'll go with everything, moderation in all things. If I spent all the time in the studio painting all the time and all the rest of it, I'd be absolutely useless to anybody else. I wouldn't be producing stuff. I wouldn't be doing things. I wouldn't be contributing to my society if I spent all my time doing that.
Yep.
So I don't. But when I do, my brain knows. It's got to the stage now that I can actually go into the studio and not paint, but it still gives me the happy chemicals because that's what it is. It's associated that place with that thing. It's a learned response. So we can do that. And so that's it. Communicate. Do something that almost makes you feel, will make you feel good, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. That kind of thing. And then seek help. Talk to people.
And there's lots of organisations,
lots of
charities,
organisations out there. If you're anxious out there, I think the best website to go to in the UK is Anxiety UK.
Okay.
They have so many things and so many helps on there that you can actually do in your own, because that's the kind of thing. Most people actually don't realise that their anxiety isn't normal. Anxiety is normal. We need that. It's our self-defense mechanism. That keeps us as that fight-flight reflex, basically. But what people don't realise is when it's an illness, and it can be an illness when it starts to interfere with your life and stop you doing the things that you would normally do. That's the tipping point. Yeah, for anxiety.
Perfect.
Anxiety is the one mental illness that is, I would say, it bucks the trend. Because most people sort of like kind of have this idea that if you're depressed, well, you thought yourself into that so you can think yourself out of it. Doesn't work that way. It's an illness. Same way you can't think yourself out of a broken leg. It's a broken brain. When anxiety is your illness, you have actually thought yourself into that because your amygdala's in charge. That's the bit at the back of the head. That's the primitive side of the brain. That's the one that's in charge, and it's in charge of your thinking. What you need to do is get him back under control. He's got out of control. So you can actually think your way out of it. And that's why cognitive behavioural therapy is really, really good for anxiety. That's what helped me as well, but that was good for my depression as well, because I like doing things rather than thinking about, well, where did this come from? Where did that come from? What is it? Didn't really do me much good. I just got frustrated. However, what I'll say is that actually this is the thing that I get with, and we could have a whole podcast on this one as well, is that when it comes to the statutory services, and when it comes to the NHS, unfortunately in particular, they're looking for a magic bullet. Don't work.
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. No. Now, I get it. They're working on the medical model. And the medical model is if you come to me with a broken leg, there's only so many things that they need to do that will fix that broken leg. And hey, guess what? It works for everyone. That's the nature of it. When it comes to the brain, that's not the case. What works for you might not work for me. Probably won't work for anybody else. Or it might work for someone, and it might work for this person over here, and it might not work. And actually, for the majority of people with mental illness, it's usually a combination of things that work. It's very rarely one thing.
And identifying them yourself, or having your support network or external groups helping you get there is critical.
And it's also about, sometimes it might actually be the psychologist and the psychiatrist and stuff.
But you've got to find that way.
That will direct you to find out what it is that works for you and stuff like that, if they're patient enough. And we need to be patient as people as well to try and find out. This self-exploration has taken me effectively about 25 to 30 years.
It's a long journey.
It's a long journey.
And you're still
learning.
Out.
I'm still learning. There's still things I can do. But what I can say is that the help is out there. It is there. It's not a case of there's not stuff out there. But actually, when they talk about professional help, the vast majority of those professional helps are not based in the NHS. And that's okay. Doesn't mean to say that people aren't professional.
Exactly.
And they're not going to help you. They will. So there are organisations out there. What I would suggest to anybody, if they think their mental health is not great and they're looking for help around that, just go onto any search engine, type in mental health help and hit enter and see what comes up.
There'll be a ton of stuff.
There'll be a ton of stuff in there. Do some research.
Perfect.
Problem is, your motivation, energy, and your concentration is gone.
Of course.
So you might need somebody else to help you do that with you, and that's okay.
Perfect. We've got to wrap it up there.
Brilliant.
Brian, it's been fascinating.
Great. I could continue.
Good.
We could do another one.
No, you can. Good detail. Thanks so much for spending the time. I really appreciate it. And somebody,
Thank you for asking
somebody will cling on.
Yeah.
All right. Great stuff. Thanks.
Good stuff.